So a brief content and trigger warning before we start. This video will include discussion of sex, trauma, and anti-queer bigotry. So if any of those things cause you discomfort, please take care of yourselves and do not watch this video. I will include resources in the description box below, which include similar information to what I will cover in this video. So if you find yourself unable to watch this video but still want to learn, feel free to click those links. Hello friends, it's October 31st, and do you know what that means? Yes, it means it's Halloween, but it also means it's the last day of Ace Awareness Week 2020. And so in honor of Ace Awareness Week, I sent out a request to my friends and followers asking them for questions, any questions at all about asexuality, with the promise that I would answer any of them. Any and all questions, regardless of how intrusive, invasive, uncomfortable, or ignorant they were. And I will. Answer them all, that is. But first, we need to make sure we're all on the same page, and so I need to answer the eternal question, what is asexuality? So basically, asexuality is exactly what it sounds like. Asexuality. And no, I'm not talking about single-celled organisms. It's the lack of sexual attraction. But wait, hold on, what on earth is sexual attraction in the first place? So basically, there are different types of attraction, which seems pretty obvious, but a lot of people don't differentiate between the different types of attraction or just don't put names to them. So I think that the 5 most common types of attraction that people usually talk about are romantic attraction, platonic attraction, sensual attraction, aesthetic attraction, and the topic of today's video, sexual attraction. So basically, all of those types of attraction are separate things. Oftentimes they come hand in hand, but they are not in any way reliant on each other. And so very briefly, what those mean is platonic attraction is when you want to be friends with someone. Romantic attraction is when you're romantically interested in someone. Aesthetic attraction is when you think someone is like pretty or just nice to look at, they're aesthetically pleasing. Sensual attraction has to do with the senses, so it's like you want to be physically close to them, or you like hugging them, you like cuddling, things like that. And sexual attraction is, of course, the desire to have sex with them? I don't know. I am not equipped to explain sexual attraction, obviously, because I'm asexual and I've never felt sexual attraction, which brings us back to the main question, what is asexuality? It is a lack of feeling sexual attraction. Okay, so asexual, lack of sexual attraction, seems pretty simple. Unfortunately, like most things in life, it's not that simple, and asexuality comes in many different forms, and it's also, like most things in life, on a spectrum. Which brings us to our first question, which is asexuality versus demisexuality. So for convenience, let's imagine this spectrum like a number line. On this side we have fully asexual, and on this side we have constantly thirsty. Anyways, in the middle we have an assortment of identities that are between the two, because obviously not everyone exists in extremes and binaries. Among these identities that exist between the two extremes are identities like gray asexual, demisexual, achiosexual, reciprosexual, the list goes on. And there's more identities being invented every day as people find people who are similar to them and want to have a word to easily describe what they are. So demisexual, which is what the question was asking about, is generally defined as not feeling sexual attraction until a strong emotional bond has been formed. This is based off of the theory of primary and secondary attraction. Primary attraction being attraction based off of the first impression or early impressions, and secondary attraction being the attraction that develops over time as you develop a bond with someone. And so just to be clear, most people who identify as demisexual do not mean it in the sense that they would not have sex with someone they don't know, because honestly that's just kind of a safety thing. Like, I'm not saying don't hook up with people, but generally, like, don't go home with strangers. That just seems like a good way to get yourself into a lot of trouble. It is, I believe, and I have heard, totally possible to be sexually attracted to someone that you've just met or have just seen across the room or only seen pictures of. Like, you see someone and think, wow, I would tap that. And maybe you wouldn't actually tap that because you don't know them, but like in theory you would. People who are demisexual generally cannot feel that until they reach that stage of secondary attraction. But wait, Piper, my friend told me she was ace, but she has experienced sexual attraction. Was she lying to me? Okay, to answer your question, a hypothetical person in my mind, no. Let's be honest, gray asexual is a handful of a word to say. So people often abbreviate it just to ace. And so people use it as an umbrella term just for any identity on the asexual spectrum that is not at the extreme of sexual. Another term that I hear people use as an umbrella term is aspec, which is short for asexual spectrum. Also, identities are fluid. People are allowed to be incorrect about their identities or have their identities change. Because, like, what are identities really? They're words that we made up in order to more conveniently communicate information about our current states of being. So not everyone who says they're ace experiences being ace the same way, and not everyone who says they're ace is going to be permanently ace. That does not mean that you can just go around telling people being ace is a phase. Like, if a kid who was short was like, hey, I'm short and I need a stool to reach the shelf, would you be like, it's just a phase, you'll grow up, you don't need a stool? No, you would give them the damn stool. Like, if this kid grows up to be a very tall adult, would you be like, hey, when you said you were short as a kid, you were being a fake short kid? No, they were short as a kid and now they're tall. Alright, next question. How might your perception or experience of asexuality differ from others? So, like I said, asexuality is just a word, and not everybody is going to experience being asexual in the same way. Thus, I cannot speak for every asexual person. I can only speak for myself, and I can only tell you the stories that I have heard from others. One major way that I differ from some other asexual people is that I am extremely sex positive. Wait, hold up. What is sex positive? And how can you be sex positive if you don't feel sexual attraction? There is a clarification I need to make before I go on, because I just didn't want to refilm the whole thing. I use sex positive for myself, but like I said, most people use sex positive as just like a term for like a set of beliefs, or sometimes even a political position that has to do with embracing sex. And I think that for what I was talking about, the more common way to refer to it is being like sex averse or sex favorable or sex indifferent. So this is actually related to the question of whether or not asexual people can have the urge or the desire to have sex or have orgasms. And the answer, very briefly, is yes, we can have orgasms, and many asexual people do desire to have sex. I get horny all the time, especially right before my period, because my body's still doing all those hormonal things that are like, increase libido, like, get pregnant, reproduce! Anyway, I am also, as you can tell, very comfortable talking about sex, and I would also entertain the idea of having sex with a partner whom I loved and trusted very much. Though they often do come hand in hand, someone's ability to feel sexual attraction and their ability to become aroused are not interdependent. Arousal is a physiological response to stimuli, whereas sexual attraction is just like a feeling that you have in your brain. Bodies are pretty amazing, honestly, and so it's just a scientific fact that you don't have to be sexually attracted to the person you're having sex with in order to have a physical response to the interaction. Because having sex without the lubrication and all the things that your body does when you're aroused is actually really unsafe. Like, you could seriously hurt yourself. So, in a way, arousal is your body's way of protecting you during sex. Another good example that those of you with penises might understand is, for example, when you were going through puberty, you might have gotten erections during math class or something. There's nothing sexy about the quadratic formula, but your body just does it. It means that you're capable of arousal and you have healthy genitals. Like, it happens. So back to the question about whether asexual people can have the urge to orgasm or have sex. I can only speak for myself, but yes. But even though my body does the whole hormones thing and I can very easily become sexually aroused, I don't find orgasms to be particularly satisfying or exciting in the way that a lot of people have described them to be. Like, honestly, they're just not worth the mess, in my opinion. This is all to say that my experience is far from universal because, like I said, there are sex-averse people. There's people who are comfortable talking about sex but not comfortable with sexual actions, and there's people who are comfortable masturbating but not having sex with other people, and there's people who feel physical disgust at the idea of having sex or talking about sex. There's even some ace people who are more comfortable with sex than I am, and they fully enjoy sex. They just never desire to have sex with specific people. Everyone's a little bit different. And like with any person, the only way to really know how they feel about sex is to ask them. How is it possible for someone not to have feelings of any kind for a person? I'm assuming this was a question based on the larger question of why people are asexual. And to be perfectly frank, nobody has any fucking clue. There are some people who identify as asexual as a result of trauma. Sometimes past sexual trauma can lead to an inability to desire sex, or it can lead to your body rejecting experiences that remind you of that trauma. But that's obviously not the case with every asexual person. Like, it's not the case with me. And so besides that, the only thing that we really know about the situation is that the cause isn't hormonal. There haven't really been all that many proper studies on asexual people because it has only very recently been accepted as a legitimate identity. But there was one study where they tracked asexual people who were taking various forms of hormonal treatments, and what they found was that even if their ability to become aroused or their libido increased, the amount of sexual attraction they experienced did not increase compared to pre-treatment. And as I explained previously, sexual attraction and libido and arousal are not all the same thing. So to answer your question, or to further fail to answer your question, I apologize. I direct you to the related question of how is it possible for someone to be purely heterosexual or homosexual? Because the question is equally unanswered. Like, who knows? It just is. And science may one day explain it, but for now the best we can do is respect each other. Part 2. Are you even fucking real? Okay, look. I didn't receive any direct questions about the validity of my existence because my friends and followers are nice. But in case there's any skeptics watching this video, I felt the need to answer some of the more common questions. The most common of them being, how do you know you're really ace? People don't usually ask this question in a nice way. It's usually like, oh, it's just a phase, or you're just looking for attention, or, now this one's my favorite one, the incels are back. Look, I would like to know when I became a man who was convinced of my own genetic inferiority because of my inability to date women. I really would like to know when that happened because I didn't realize it had. But to answer the question, because there really are a lot of genuinely decent people who just want to know, like, how do I know that this is a real thing and not something that people have just invented? And to that I would answer, how do you know that any sexual identity is real? We live in a society where being heterosexual is the norm, it's the standard, it's just what everyone assumes that you are. And how do we know that heterosexuality is a real thing? Well, because there's billions of people in the world who all say that they're heterosexual. Well, hi. Here I am, claiming that I am asexual. And there's a lot of other people in the world who also claim to be asexual, and we are hurting absolutely nobody. The least you can do is show us a little basic respect for our boundaries. Part 3. What is it like to be ace? I just want to know if you like girls, not trying to hit on you. I just want to know you don't... Yeah, I have a girlfriend. How might your perception or experiences of asexuality differ from others? Part 2. Okay, so First of all, in case you're wondering why all of these or most of these questions have asexuality written in all caps, it's because my autocorrect only recognizes asexual as an all caps word, and I left it like that in my request for questions as a joke. And so some of the people are just like following along with the joke, but I apologize to all of the people who thought that asexual was a word that actually had to be in all caps. It doesn't have to be in all caps. It's like not even a proper noun. You can write it in lowercase. I'm sorry. Anyways, I brought up this question again because I just thought of another common difference between me and other people's experiences, which is how our cultures talk about sex. And I mean this in terms of culture in like the large broad sense, like I'm Asian American and I live on the East Coast, and also in like the very small community sense. Because I grew up in an environment where I received very good sexual education when I was in middle school. My mom is a doctor, so we talk about bodily functions very frankly. And then in high school, my friends were all very transparent about who they wanted to have sex with or who they had had sex with. It was just a thing that we talked about as friends. So for me, I was like very hyper aware of the fact that other people often felt sexual attraction. So it was very clear to me that I was different in some way. Other people live in environments where sex is more private or where people are just expected not to act on their sexual urges or their feelings of sexual attraction. And so in those situations, a person might not immediately jump to the assumption that they are asexual or that they are different from sexual people. And so such a person might not identify as ace until later in life, or they might never identify as ace at all, because like I said, identities are just words that we invented to communicate information. They're tools, and not everybody needs the tool. And that is 100% valid. Nobody should ever feel forced to take on a label that they don't vibe with or that they don't need. Do asexual people get into love relationships? Yes, all the time. Like I said, romantic attraction and sexual attraction are different things. They often go hand in hand, but oftentimes they don't. I myself am currently in a relationship. I love my girlfriend very much. She's very wonderful. That being said, there are some people who are asexual who are also aromantic, and since I'm not aromantic and it's not what this video is meant to be about, I'm not going to go into detail about it, but basically someone who's aromantic is someone who doesn't experience romantic attraction. And there's a large number of people who are asexual who are also aromantic, but there's also a large number of people who are asexual who experience romantic attraction all the time. So to briefly answer your question, yes, asexual people can be in romantic love relationships, but you should also be aware that there are aromantic asexual people. Difference between being sexual and being sexualized. This is a complicated question. So the strict dictionary definition of to sexualize, I believe, is to make something sexual in nature or to attribute a sex or sexual role to something. And so if you completely take away any kind of like cultural context or like connotation of the word sexualize, to sexualize something is just to view something as sexual, and it's not an inherently bad thing. Okay, so let's take a step back. The person who requested that I talk about sexual versus being sexualized is the same person who asked me to talk about being asexual and also being a dancer. And these two questions go hand in hand because I'm one of the biggest supporters of asexual people doing sexy dances, but there's so many people who are confused as to why an asexual person would present themselves in a typically sexual nature or how that's even possible. And to explain why I find doing sexy dances so liberating and freeing, I'd have to go really into detail about how our society treats bodies and my own relationship with my body. But the point is, that's why I enjoy doing sexy dances. I find them really fun and really freeing. And being able to feel sexual attraction isn't a prerequisite for being able to do a sexy dance well. Asexual people still have eyes with which we can observe what most people find to be sexually attractive. And we still have ears with which we can receive feedback and implement it. So back to the question of being sexual and being sexualized, in my opinion, being sexual is something that comes completely from yourself. You do the actions and then you decide whether or not they're sexual in nature. Being sexualized is when someone else interprets your actions as sexual. And like I said, being sexualized is not always a bad thing. Like, how sad would it be if you were trying to flirt with someone to try to get them into bed and the said person never caught on because they thought it was always bad to sexualize things and they never caught on that your actions were sexual in nature. But that being said, people usually use the term sexualize in a negative connotation. So this is what I was talking about when I said that sexualizing only purely means to make something sexual in a completely non-cultural context, because the way people use sexualize often is related to two things. The first one is turning things that were not intended to be sexual into sexual things, regardless of what the original doer of said actions tells you their intention was. The second context in which it's used negatively is in the context of sexual objectification, which is often used, honestly, as a synonym for sexualizing. And sexual objectification is basically when you sexualize someone to the point where you lose sight of the fact that they are their own independent, autonomous being. Basically, you turn them into an inanimate or unautonomous object. So these two things, which are very prevalent today and which people are talking about more than they used to in the past, are the reason that most people use the word to sexualize in a negative connotation, even though it's still technically sexualizing when you see anything as sexy at all. And so tying this back into being an asexual person who does sexual dances, I actually really appreciate it when people, to a certain extent, sexualize me, because it means that I'm doing something right. When someone says, oh, like, you're so sexy, it means that I've done the dance well. Like, that's my goal. But there's also a line that you do not cross. Just because somebody presents themselves in a sexual way does not mean that they intend to have sex with specifically you, or that they're inviting you to have sex with them. So like I said, I do really appreciate it when people come into my comment sections of my videos that I post and go like, wow, you're so sexy. What I don't appreciate is people insinuating that they actually want to have sex with me, or for God knows what reason, feeling like they need to tell me about the sexual fantasies that they've had from watching me dance. Like, TMI, dude, TMI. And what I super don't appreciate is people coming into my DMs assuming that I run a sex chat just because I've posted some sexy dance videos and sending me unsolicited dick pics even after I told them that I was not running a sex chat. Yes, it's happened. It's happened. Piper, says the dude bro who lives in my head. That's so selfish. Why would you present yourself sexually if you did not intend to have sex with me? Well, tough luck. I'm so sorry, but not everything is about you. Do you play football for the greater good of mankind, or do you do it because you think it's cool and you think it's fun? Look, I can't speak for others. I can only speak for myself. And so not everybody is going to draw the line in the same place that I do. But like, personally, it's none of my business what goes on in your head. Like, fine, I don't care. Just don't involve me in it. TLDR, by the dictionary definition, I do usually want to be sexualized at least a little bit when I'm being sexual. But the concept of sexualizing has a subtext of objectification and fetishization that I'm sure nobody wants. So just be aware of how you treat people that you are viewing as sexual, and be aware that sometimes actions that you view as sexual are not actually meant to be sexual. Alright, and now on to the last question. I actually left this question for last, even though it was the question that I was asked by the most people, because it just made me so, like, happy. I received a lot of questions basically asking how I knew I was ace, and not in the same rude way that I was talking about in my "Are you even fucking real?" section, but in the I'm questioning kind of way. And I'm gonna be really honest, helping questioning people explore identities is something that brings me a lot of joy, and it fills me with a lot of love. Like, regardless of what you decide your identity is in the end, or if you just decide on having no labels at all, like, I don't know. It makes me really happy, the idea that maybe I could help someone figure things out a little bit. Anyways, here is my story. I grew up very unconcerned with sex. I put a lot of effort into getting a boyfriend, which is like a whole nother can of worms. But even though I was fully aware that sex was a thing and that it happened, I just didn't think about it very much. That is until I started reading fanfiction and I learned how to masturbate. So suddenly I could recognize that feeling I sometimes got in my pelvic region as sexual arousal. And I knew what to do about it. So cue high school, more of my friends are talking about sex. I'm reading more books with an adult target audience where romantic relationships are very intertwined with sexual experiences. And so obviously I became very curious about sex and what it entailed and what it felt like. And like any girl would, I tried to imagine it. So I think that this is when I really realized that I was asexual, because it's not like the concept of sex was foreign to me, or like I had any kind of unhealthy relationship with sex, but I could not think of a single person, be it friend, familiar person, acquaintance, celebrity, fictional person, who it did not feel weird to imagine having sex with. So when did I realize I was asexual? When I made this sad and sorry attempt at having sexual fantasies about specific people. It's been a good few years since I realized I was asexual, and I'm starting to realize that most sexual people don't have to make a conscious effort to have sexual fantasies. So, like, the fact that I was even trying in the first place should have been a giant neon sign yelling, "You're ace." But looking back, there were other clues too. Y'all, I just spilled water on myself, so if you can tell that my shirt is wet, that's why. Anyways, when I was in 6th grade, I had a friend who I exchanged emails with. Yes, this was back when people actually exchanged emails with their friends. And something we talked about a lot was boys. And she had a crush on this guy, and her only description of him was that he was blonde and he was hot. Like, apparently he was really hot. And me not having any clue what that meant, I asked her to explain it. This naturally evolved into a discussion about what celebrities we thought were hot. And so me, being the asexual child that I was, could only come up with the answer of Benedict Cumberbatch, because I had recently seen a news article about how in some magazine he had been voted the sexiest man alive or something. I don't even remember. Suffice to say, she did not approve of my choice. Moment number 2. A few weeks ago, I was watching videos of the K-pop group ATEEZ. Specifically, videos of San, known amongst fans as being simultaneously the cutest and the sexiest person on earth, doing a sexy dance freestyle at a concert. My reaction? To take a screenshot of him body rolling onto the floor so that I could comment on how nicely he arched his back and how strong his arms must be. which I'm realizing now sounds like something a very sexual person would say, but like, I swear I said this in the most asexual way possible. I mean, look at that curve. It's just so aesthetically pleasing. Moment number 3. I'm helping my gay friend, he's a couple years older than me, carry a painting to his dorm room. We walk through the quad and pass by a whole horde of shirtless men playing games because it's summer. People do that in the summer. I think that I should note at this point that I am attracted to men. He makes a comment about how nice the view is, and I turn and I look at them and I'm just so confused. Like, what's nice about looking at a bunch of shirtless boys? I am aware that there's some bias involved. We as humans will always remember our lives a little bit differently from how they actually happened. And as humans, when we're coming to terms with our identities, we also consciously and unconsciously interpret those memories in a way that helps us consolidate said identity. But here's the thing. Just because your memories are biased doesn't mean that somebody else has better authority than you to tell you how you felt in the past or how you feel now. Because that's what sexual attraction is. It's a feeling. It's not an action or an appearance. It's just something that you feel. And nobody can tell you what you're feeling better than yourself, and nobody can decide that you're feeling sexual attraction except for you. Just because you, let's say, had a crush in 4th grade, which, by the way, would be more romantic attraction than sexual attraction, doesn't mean that you can't be asexual. Or just because you've had enjoyable and consensual sex with a couple people in the past doesn't mean that you were necessarily sexually attracted to them. And even if you have experienced sexual attraction in the past, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're not asexual now, because like I said, people's identities and states of being change. I feel like I'm repeating myself over and over again, but it needs to be said. Identities are tools. They're just things we created in order to quickly communicate information about our current states of being. And if that state of being changes, or if you incorrectly identified your state of being, then that's okay. And anyone who gives you shit for being wrong about something as complicated as feelings is an asshole. Ah, okay, that was such a long video, and I spilled so much water on this table. Oh my gosh, my notes are bleeding everywhere because I write my notes in pen. We love that. But the point I'm trying to make is that, unfortunately, I have no advice on how to convince other people that you're really asexual. I guess what I'm trying to say is that assigning a label to yourself doesn't have to be a huge thing. Regardless of what you call yourself or what other people call you, who you are right now and what you are feeling at this moment will not change. And I think that's beautiful. I have emerged! Oh gosh. I forget what I was talking about. For anyone who's wondering how long this video took me to make, I've been talking for like 2 hours. My SD card actually filled up, so I had to transfer all of the files off so I could delete them, and now I have no idea what I was talking about anymore.